time for overtime.
Stop what you're doing and listen.
In the world of sports, it's all about the playmakers in today's headlines, from locals to the pros, with interviews from local standouts and sports all-stars across the country that will have you talking.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're here with the national champions.
Hear from coaches to players, sports analysts, and broadcasters who are a part of the action every day. Overtime, now with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Welcome into this Wednesday edition of Overtime. No, your clock is not wrong. We're going early today and making way for the Minnesota Twins pregame 11:30. First pitch today for Game 2 against the Milwaukee Brewers from Milwaukee is a 12:10 start, which means we're up and at 'em. We are going early today on Overtime. Welcome into the show. Beautiful day in South Dakota and right here in the 605. Always a pleasure to join you on the airwaves. I'm your host, Bert Ramin. You can track me down anytime on Twitter at BertESPN or hit me up on the ESPN hotline, 605-362-3776. It's a short show today. We got headlines and highlights in due time. We'll talk all things basketball, WNBA, women's basketball, men's basketball, transfer portal, including Zeke Mayo of South Dakota State officially finding his way to a new collegiate basketball home. We'll update you on that news very, very shortly here and also talk some coaching changes and broader strokes in the NBA as well. We'll be talking football in hour number 1 around 10:40 with our friend Arif Hasan of Wide Left Post. He has authored several big names, several interesting articles lately for his publication. A lot have drawn some eyes, including a write-up on Aaron Rodgers, a write-up on Kirk Cousins, and one of the premier draft coverage sites of the past and the present, the Draft Network, drew a lot of readers, a lot of eyes. Arif Hasan of the Wide Left Post will join us to talk NFL Draft, Minnesota Vikings, and everything in between in today's NFL coming up in due time. That interview hitting around 10:40 this morning on the show. Hour number 2, headlines and highlights. And as promised, I always try to keep my promises with you out there that listen, the identity crisis is each and every Wednesday. Just because we're early today does not mean we're getting rid of the opportunity to win big here on the show. I got the identity crisis penciled in for right around 11:15 on today's program. And, of course, your courtesy clue, if you listen early, you get rewarded. Early bird gets the worm. I firmly believe that. Here's your courtesy clue for today's identity crisis. Former NFL running back. That's your courtesy clue for today's identity crisis. If you know your stuff, dial us up around 11:15. And as always, play by the rules. You can win once per 30 days here on Overtime. Thanks as always for playing. That hotline number, 605-362-3776. And it is day number 2 of our NFL draft previews. And today we'll be talking Carolina Panthers and Kansas City Chiefs, needs and fits in the NFL draft early and throughout. We'll break down the Super Bowl champions and the team that's on the complete other side of the spectrum. The Carolina Panthers do not have a first-round pick, but somehow, some way, they've accumulated some decent draft capital across the board, inked to deal with Deontay Johnson. We'll talk Panthers, we'll talk Chiefs to round out the show today. NFL draft previews roll along on this Wednesday, April 3rd edition of Overtime. Into your scorecard now. NHL first this time of year. Chicago lost to the Islanders last night 2-1 on the road. Boston gets a 3-0 shutout road win over Nashville. Improves their record of 44-17-15. And the Minnesota Wild keep on coming, not giving up on the season. 3-2 winners at home last night.
Mason Shaw trying to knife it for a king. Open in front. Lettieri scores!
And, of course, our coverage and audio from the Minnesota Wild all season long, courtesy of K-Fan. As we move forward, Minnesota 3-2 winners yesterday, 36-28-10 is their record. Other notable score last night, Vegas got another win over Vancouver, 6-3 at home, 42-25-8. Vegas, one of many teams the Wild are chasing, and hope stumbles down the stretch to give themselves a shot in the Western Conference playoffs. Tonight in the NHL, Devils at Rangers, 6 o'clock on TNT. Oilers at Stars, 8:30 on ESPN+. Kraken at the Kings, 8:30, late one, also on TNT. NBA Finals from yesterday, a lot of stories there. LeBron goes for 23. Lakers pick up an important win in Toronto, 128-111. LA, 43-33 now. Milwaukee bafflingly loses last night to 14-win Washington. Now they're 15-win Washington. Giannis puts up a big game, but Milwaukee falls yet again. Are we seeing a return of the pre-deadline, pre-All-Star break Bucks? It looks like we might be. That final score last night from D.C., 117-113. The Bucks 47-28. Big news for the Sixers and big news for the Eastern Conference as Philly is back in it. Joel Embiid back on the floor, and it leads to good stuff on the court for Philly.
Lowry across midcourt, hands off to Oubre. They're going to play middle pick and roll with Embiid. Oubre bounces to Joel. Joel from 14 straight away. Bucket, it's good. Tie game, 101-101.
Final score, 109-105. Not only a big win for the Sixers, but a huge loss for the OKC Thunder. Means good stuff on the way for Minnesota, or so we hoped. And the Timberwolves get a win they should have gotten against Houston at home.
Jaden baseline drive, hang, kick to the corner, it's Conley. Up top, Naz Reid almost got stripped. Here's Ant with it. Ant takes a run by Brooks in the paint. Oh! Rises and hammers! A two-handed flush for Anthony Edwards!
Night after night, amazing stuff from Anthony Edwards. It was Naz Reid's kind of night, though. 25 points for the Timberwolves. They moved their record to 52-23, identical to that of OKC. The other team in that mix for the top seed in the West right now, Denver Nuggets. They squeak by San Antonio 110-105.
Jaden baseline drive.
Joker now against Wemby, one-on-one. Gets in the paint, little hook shot. Good! 105-103 Denver.
And, of course, I'm baffled here, late to recap that highlight because I am absolutely floored at what just hit the bottom ticker on ESPN. We'll dive into that breaking news in just 1 second. But lastly, out of the NBA, we'll talk about an early exit of the NBA playoffs here soon. Dallas lost to Golden State 104-100. Chris Canty had this to say this morning on Unsportsmanlike about what team could exit the postseason very early this year.
With the Magic, if they play the Knicks, which is what their first round series would be, because that's the 4-5 matchup. If they play the Knicks, they've got home court advantage. The Knicks might not have Julius Randle or Mitchell Robinson. With the front court of Banchero and Wagner, why couldn't the Magic win that series again?
You really could see the Knicks losing to the Magic, CeCe?
Yes.
And again, the Knicks might be heading out early. That's Chris Canty there. Men's basketball, Final Four starts Saturday from State Farm Stadium in Glendale. NC State and Purdue, 5 o'clock on TBS. Alabama and UConn, 7:45. Also on TBS, Donovan Clingan, the center for UConn basketball, had this to say about his team staying hungry after taking home the title last year.
It's a hungry program that's, trying to do special things. Coach Shirley really, instills that hunger in us in practice. We practice really hard every single day, even, on our best wins. We practice like we lose. He just makes us hungry. If you want to be great, if you want to go on and, have a special career, you got to win. You got to win a lot, and, you can't be satisfied with wherever you've gotten to. And, you just have to keep your eye on the prize and just keep pushing for more, keep pushing to, want to win more. And, with this new team, with only a couple returners from last year, we want to do it for the young guys. We want to do it for the transfers, and, we want them to experience winning like we were able to last year.
That's UConn big Donovan Clingan. On to women's basketball. WNIT this afternoon and evening, 5 o'clock on ESPN+. St. Louis and Vermont in one semifinal, 6 o'clock on ESPN+ on the other. Minnesota and Troy. That's the Final Four of the WNIT. Final Four is set in the NCAA tournament beginning Friday from Cleveland. NC State, South Carolina, 6 o'clock on ESPN. UConn and Iowa lock horns, 8 o'clock on ESPN. Lot to look forward to there. Major League Baseball finals from yesterday before we dive into this crazy breaking news from the National Football League that just hit ESPN TV moments ago. Cubbies' big win over the Rockies yesterday, 12-2. Minnesota lost in Milwaukee, 3-2. Louis Varland takes the loss for the Twins. Elsewhere, Kansas City over Baltimore, 4-1. The Atlanta Braves fall to the White Sox. Win number 1 of the year for Chicago, 1-4 their record. Final score there, 3-2. Cleveland wins in Seattle, 5-2. Yankees finally lose. They're blanked in Arizona against the D-backs, 7-0. New record for the Yanks is 5-1, and St. Louis gets a win in San Diego. Their record 3-3. Final score there 5-2. Tigers and Mets yesterday from New York was postponed due to rain in the area. Will be made up on Thursday. And today and tonight in Major League Baseball, we got several matchups of note. Royals and Orioles, Twins and Brewers, both are 12:05 start times. 11:30, the pregame coverage for the Twins right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. Other matchups concerning AL Central teams and area squads. Guardians at Mariners, Cardinals at Padres, Tigers at Mets, Rockies at Cubs. Those between 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock this evening. NFL news hitting the ticker right now. The Buffalo Bills are moving on from Stefon Diggs. The receiver is going to join his third NFL team. Started his career with the Vikings, had a lot of success there, a couple big-time moments, and now went on to the Buffalo Bills where he was electric. One of the top 3, top 4, top 5 wide receivers for his entire tenure in Buffalo. It was a mixed bag emotionally, and you felt a little bit of a fraying of the wire at times about the relationship between Stefon Diggs, the team, the quarterback Josh Allen, his involvement in the offense, what have you. The Buffalo Bills are not in great financial shape, and honestly, the window's open because of who they got at quarterback. But the rest of the team is taking a step back and starting to have to pay the piper, and the Bills are officially trading Stefon Diggs to the Houston Texans. What a get this is for Houston. Draft pick compensation is all I've got right now from Adam Schefter. I'll keep you posted. Apparently, I did see some rumblings about a second-round pick next year, not this year, a second-round pick next year. But get a load of this, because I'm a huge fan of what Houston is doing. I'm a huge fan of what they've done. Their offense is going to be absolutely filthy moving forward. C.J. Stroud, if he doesn't regress, if he stays about the same, continues to move along, look out for C.J. Stroud at quarterback as far as an MVP candidate goes and everything like that. C.J. Stroud, your quarterback. Joe Mixon, huge upgraded running back from Damian Pierce and Devin Singletary. Pierce is still there, by the way, so if you like him, if you like his stock, he's still in the mix. Joe Mixon, Damian Pierce at running back. Stefon Diggs at wide receiver 1. Nico Collins, a rising star at wide receiver 2. You got Tank Dell there. You got John Mechie. You got other guys there. Noah Brown. And the Houston Texans right now looking really good on offense. Tight end Dalton Schultz. And they add Stefon Diggs to the fold. We will react to this, get some audio, break it down, I'm sure, tomorrow on the show. But what a huge get for the Houston Texans, as that is right exactly what I'm talking about. When you're adding pieces and you're drafting guys, you're signing free agents, you got to strike when the iron is hot. And what do I mean by that? I don't mean at all about, hey, we got the money, let's go get the guy. I mean, hey, do we have the money? Check. Hey, are we a good team? Check. Hey, were we in the playoffs last year or should we have been? Check. Houston checks all the boxes right now. Ascending team, young team, a lot of money, enthusiastic coaching staff. They are going to the playoffs again. They're going to run the AFC South. And the Houston Texans are for real, folks. And I don't care if you think about the personality mix with Stefon Diggs, C.J. Stroud, and everybody else that is on that offense. They'll figure it out because that is a dynamite program right now. DeMeco Ryans, really great head coach. I love that for the Houston Texans. And to be frank and honest, I don't mind it for the Buffalo Bills. Yes, they didn't get that much for Stefon Diggs, but as far as the relationship goes, the consistent unhappiness that's been reported there in Buffalo with Diggs and Allen and everything going on there, it's time to hit that reset button in Buffalo, and they're not going to be terrible. They got the window open with the quarterback. They're still an attractive place. They got the best fans, if at worst, the third best fans in the entire NFL. I like what the Bills are still. I don't necessarily think they're a outright Super Bowl contender still right now, but the window's open because of the quarterback. But it's a win-win there. They get rid of Stefon Diggs, they get some draft capital, they reset the market, get some young receivers some more playing time, and they move forward into the future and leave that window open, clear up that money. And the Houston Texans will pay Stefon Diggs. They'll involve him in the offense, and he will be a focal point of that Houston Texan offense moving forward. Big news off the jump. Stefon Diggs traded from the Buffalo Bills to the Houston Texans as of just minutes ago, according to Adam Schefter on ESPN. NFL talk once again. We had Matt Miller on the show last week, and he commented on the overall hype, he'll call it, around both Michael Penix and J.J. McCarthy. Both quarterbacks are in that top 6 quarterback fold that could go in the top round, could go in the top 15. Here is what Miller had to say about whether or not the hype is real and how much he's buying into Penix and McCarthy.
I would say McCarthy, the hype is legitimate in the sense of, he's going to be a top 6 draft pick is where I would say right now. I started to say top 10, but top 6 is definitely where his range is at. That's, based on, and it was starting to be there back in January. I know we all have short-term memories, but back in January, that was where the conversation was at, and he's done nothing but solidify that. I think with Michael Penix, he had such a strong finish to the season, the game against Texas being one of the best passing performances of any player this year. Against Michigan, not as good of a game. I think, arguably the worst game of his over the last 2 years. And then we see, a strong combine, pretty good pro day. So he's definitely, talented. And I think the biggest question for Penix will be the medicals, which, Q, you and I have been doing this a long time. The medicals, we might not know until the draft.
Matt Miller, ESPN NFL draft analyst and insider on Michael Penix. And I got to say this because the top 6 quarterbacks, all of them in some form or fashion check the box for me. Because you got the Heisman candidacy, you got the Heisman winners of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels. You got the guys that did it at a high level at a premier program and mix it in there with Drake May, J.J. McCarthy. And then Bo Nix, the most accurate dude, 78% completions last year, dynamite player, had an extraordinary college career, and his experience is his big strength heading into the draft. Michael Penix Jr., if you didn't watch him in Indiana, you missed out. If you didn't watch him at Washington, you really missed out because that dude, you mentioned the Texas game there in the clip with Matt Miller, his games against Oregon this past year and the game against Oregon the year prior, so darn good, put some zip on the ball, extremely accurate, and that dude is effortless, chucking the football down the field. I really do like a lot about each and every of these 6 quarterbacks that are likely to go in the first round, and you heard Matt Miller there, J.J. McCarthy, just about a lock to be a top 6 pick in the NFL draft. Penix likely to fall a little bit. Bo Nix is likely to be the 6th guy off the board, but there is a lot to love about the NFL draft's quarterbacks this season. NASCAR race coming up on Sunday, 2 o'clock at Martinsville, broadcast on Fox Sports 1. And as we round out your scorecard, PGA Tour Golf gets going tomorrow from the Valero Texas Open from San Antonio. Into your Reliabank headlines of the day, we already hit you with a big headline from the NFL. Stefon Diggs traded from the Bills to the Houston Texans. We'll get you a compensation update as soon as that becomes official. But now the official news breaking this morning that South Dakota State's Zeke Mayo has announced his transfer to Kansas University. Former Lawrence High School standout Zeke Mayo averaged over 18 points per game this year and 18 points during last year at South Dakota State, has announced his plans to transfer to Kansas. The 6'4", 185-pound junior combo guard, reigning Summit League Player of the Year, revealed his choice after Tuesday's unofficial visit to KU, made the announcement on social media site X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it. Mayo wrote, "A homecoming like no other, Lawrence, Kansas. Let's rock." Congratulations to Zeke Mayo. We talked with Coach Hendo yesterday about Mayo and Will Kyle opting to leave the program and saying, yeah, it's disappointing, but I wish those guys absolutely nothing but the best, the success, and everything they got coming to them. Well said by Hendo, and now we know that Zeke Mayo, a great utilization of the transfer portal there. He heads home to presumably conclude his college career. Chose the Jayhawks over Creighton, Oklahoma, and Texas. And last Tuesday, Mayo announced his plans to enter his name in both the draft as well as the transfer portal. Planned on making an official visit to Oklahoma in mid-April, but Kansas is the place to be for Zeke Mayo. Congratulations to that young man. Feel blessed and honored to have watched and covered him over the last couple years with South Dakota State, and we'll be rooting for him, I'm sure, Jackrabbit fans and otherwise, Summit League fans, as we did with Max Asmus and saying, hey, I watched that guy in Sioux Falls. He's now down in Austin lighting it up, and now he's on to the NBA sometime soon. Zeke Mayo, I wish all the best for in the future. Again, no bad blood at all there. Wish him the best at Kansas, and I'll be rooting for him down in Lawrence. That article available, kansascitystar.com. Moving forward with your Reliant Bank headlines of the day, one of the top-rated cornerbacks in this year's draft class is set to get on the field in front of scouts next week. Cooper DeJean's final season at Iowa ended with a broken leg, but he said at the scouting combine that he'd been medically cleared. Adam Schefter of ESPN has reported that DeJean has informed teams that he's also been cleared for all football activities and that he'll plan a workout for interested teams. That should be everyone at the school on April the 8th. DeJean's workout is expected to include all on-field testing and position drills. Last year, 41 tackles, 2 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 5 passes defensed, and he also averaged 11.5 yards per punt return and returned 1, some would say 2, punts for touchdowns. Cooper DeJean, top-flight NFL draft prospect and an Iowa native, OAB-CIG High School not too far away from here. News yesterday, Vikings offense coordinator Wes Phillips was arrested back in December for driving while intoxicated, got a plea deal for a lesser charge of careless driving, and the Minnesota Vikings have decided that Phillips won't get much punishment from the team. Phillips has been suspended by the team for the next 3 weeks, according to multiple reports. 3 weeks in April, not particularly important to an offensive coordinator. Vikings offseason program doesn't start until April the 15th, and the first phase of that program doesn't have any on-field work anyway, so Phillips isn't going to miss significant time coaching the Vikings offense. That article available, Pro Football Talk at NBCSports.com. Wes Phillips, offense coordinator, a DWI case in recent memory, suspended by the team for 3 weeks. We'll be back in due time. For those of you that are on board with me and not expanding the NCAA tournament, thanks for saying that. But let's talk a little bit about some changes that could be coming to the women's tournament, not in terms of field size, but in terms of how it is executed. The head of the NCAA women's basketball tournament is pushing to review potential changes to this event's format over the summer, a year sooner than previously planned. The Women's Basketball Committee was scheduled to revisit its decision to hold the first 2 rounds of the tournament at campus sites for highly ranked teams and to hold its second weekend games in 2 sites rather than 4 after the 2025 championships. Lynn Holzman, president of women's basketball, said she believes they've seen enough data about the growth of the sport to consider changes this year. Given the trajectory of success we've experienced over the last couple of years, I see no reason to wait to start that review. The governance structure has to approve a review, but that is our ask coming out of this championship. I believe that it will take place. A change in format for the first rounds could potentially help avoid logistical problems such as the ones that occurred at the games hosted by Gonzaga in the first 2 rounds of this year's tournament. A lack of available hotel space forced multiple teams competing in Spokane, Washington to stay more than 30 miles away from the Gonzaga campus near Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. While in Idaho, members of the Utah basketball team were reportedly harassed by men flying Confederate flags in their truck and yelling racist slurs. Regardless, it was a mess in terms of lodging. It was a mess in terms of logistics, and that incident comes to mind as well. But the women's game is growing at a rocket ship trajectory right now, and I do not blame the president for exploring new and innovative methods in terms of scheduling, in terms of sites and regions. I think the women's game should just go ahead and adopt what the men have moving forward because the structure and the growth of women's basketball is at a historic pace right now. Speaking of which, let's round out your Reliant Bank headlines of the day with this. Caitlin Clark can claim another record. The most watched women's basketball game in history. Iowa's win over LSU in the Elite Eight of the women's NCAA tournament on Monday night averaged 12.3 million viewers on ESPN, according to Nielsen. That makes it one of the most viewed games in any sport other than NFL football over the past year. Iowa LSU outdrew all but one of the 5 games in last year's NBA Finals, along with the clinching game of last year's World Series. Clark had 41 points, and the Hawkeyes avenged last year's loss to the Tigers. Viewership surpassed the 11.84 million who watched the 1983 NCAA championship game between Southern Cal and Louisiana Tech. LSU coach Kim Mulkey played for La Tech in that contest, matched up with USC great Cheryl Miller in that contest, which the Trojans won 64-58. And according to ESPN, the 2002 Women's National Championship game between UConn and Oklahoma had the old mark at 5.68 million. And on Monday night, an Elite Eight matchup. Elite Eight, not the semi, not the final. Elite Eight, 12.3 million viewers. That is more than double. And that's where we are with women's sports, women's basketball, and everything right now. It is remarkable. Congratulations to all involved. But I think we got bigger, better things coming because we got Beckers, we got Clark coming up on Friday from Cleveland. That's going to be fun. You can watch undefeated South Carolina that night as well. 12.3 million. I think next year will be north of 14, 15. I can't wait to continue to ride this rocket ship that is women's basketball. 12.3 million viewers, a record for Monday night's game in which Iowa punched their ticket to another Final Four under Caitlin Clark. Now, let's move forward. Basketball, latest news, transfers, coaching changes, NBA news as well to get to. It's all coming up next. It's a early Wednesday edition of Overtime. We're going to be off the air at 11:30 to make way for Twins pregame. Until then, buckle up and get ready for the ride of Overtime on a Wednesday. Thanks for being with us right here on ESPN Sioux Falls.
ESPN Sioux Falls gets you back to more of Overtime with Bert Rameen on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO, Sioux Falls sports leader.
Right back with you. It is the early Wednesday edition of Overtime. Thanks for tuning us in. Reminder, we are still testing your wits with the identity crisis today. That's coming up later on the show, right around 11:15. Opportunity to win a gift card to the original Pancake House with the identity crisis each and every week here on Overtime. If you joined us from the jump, you got your courtesy clue in the bag. And if you know what we're talking about, 605-362-3776 later on in hour number 2 for the identity crisis brought to you by the original Pancake House. Also in hour number 2, we will be breaking down the big news from the National Football League. Stefon Diggs no longer a Buffalo Bill and joins a different AFC squad down south in Houston, Texas with the Houston Texans. Now, in case you're wondering, the Buffalo Bills wide receiver room is less than superb right now. The wide receiver 1 for the Buffalo Bills had a decent rookie year last year, Khalil Shakir. They've got Curtis Samuel in-house, Mac Hollins, and then everybody else behind them, KJ Hamler, Andy Isabella, Justin Shorter, Tyrell Shavers, and Brian Thompson. The Bills need 1 wide receiver, 2 wide receivers, maybe 3 before the NFL season officially kicks off in the fall. They got some work to do because they also said so long to Gabe Davis this offseason. He joins the Jacksonville Jaguars. So right now, Josh Allen's biggest targets in the offense are probably a tight end. Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid, pretty good players there. Kincaid entering year number 2. Knox has been around for a little while longer. But Khalil Shakir, go ahead and load up and buy some shares in fantasy football in Khalil Shakir as the new wide receiver 1 with the Buffalo Bills. We promised you some basketball talk this hour, and right now in this segment, and here it comes, Joel Embiid is back. And what does that mean for the rest of the NBA? Returning to the court 8 weeks to the day after undergoing a procedure on the lateral meniscus in his left knee. Sixers center Joel Embiid admitted that the mental recovery process from the injury was as difficult as any he's gone through across his NBA career. Usually when I have injuries, I tell myself, move on to the next one, get better, and then fix it, said Embiid, who finished with 24 points, 6 rebounds, and 7 assists, also had 3 steals and just 6 turnovers in a 109-105 victory over OKC at Wells Fargo Center on Tuesday night. But this one took a toll mentally. Being depressed, it was not a good one. So still not where I'm supposed to be, especially mentally, but I just love to play and love basketball, and I want to play and have any chance that I can to be out there. I'm going to take it. Embiid was asked what specifically he meant by not being in the right place mentally. He said, for some reason, this injury just, was disappointing. It was depressing. It took me a while to get over it, and I still haven't gotten over it, so just got to take it day by day and look at the positive. There is a lot of positive ahead for the Philadelphia 76ers, so much so, in fact, that I think they're going to be a player in the postseason. That's not necessarily a hot take, but the Sixers right now occupy the 8th seed. They're 5 games better than the Bulls with the 9. So they're locked into that top 8 pretty much. They've played, 76 games. So they got 6 games left on the schedule, and they're still within striking distance of Indiana and the New York Knicks to get into that top 6, but I don't think Philly really needs to. But I'll tell you what, if Philly can find a way to play up to get ahead of Miami, that's a 1.5 game back of Miami, and they've got 6 games left. If they can find a way into that 7 spot and they draw Milwaukee in the first round, or if they stay at 8 and they have Boston in the first round, I would not count Philly out entirely. I don't think they're caliber and up to snuff to upset Boston, but Milwaukee, a Jekyll and Hyde team that's just 5-5 in their last 10, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility, people. I really don't. So look out for Philly. If Embiid was healthy throughout the entire way, they'd probably be the 2 seed right now. Unfortunately, down the stretch of the season, they did the best they could. Still in the playoffs, they're the 8th seed at present, more than likely locked in as their floor, but they could feasibly get up to, I don't know, call it the 4 seed if those teams, the Magic, Knicks, Pacers, and Heat ahead of them, stumble and stub their toes. I would say that Philly probably going to play into the 7. I would imagine with the return of Joel Embiid, we will wait and see. Currently, they're 1.5 games worse than the 7th-seeded Miami Heat. And Miami playing good ball, 7-3 over their last 10. Western Conference update, big night for the Timberwolves last night. OKC lost, so they've got an identical record as the Thunder at 52-23. Both of those teams are just a half game back of Denver for the top spot, 53-23. And seeds 4 through 10 here, Clippers, Mavericks, Pelicans. Play in, it's the Kings, Suns, Lakers, Warriors, and then 3 games back now. It appears a little bit of a turn for the Houston Rockets. After that long winning streak, they've lost 2 in a row, and they're now 3 full games out with just a few games to go in the season behind the Golden State Warriors. As far as movement in and out of the play-in goes at that 6-7 spot, that's definitely feasible in the West as well, with Dallas and New Orleans just a 1 game better than the Kings and the Suns right now. Lakers and Warriors look like they're shoo-ins to be in that play-in contest round of the NBA playoffs, but we will certainly wait and see. Big news out of the G League. The Stockton Kings' Lindsey Harding became the first woman to be named Coach of the Year in the NBA's G League yesterday. Harding earned the honor after guiding the Kings to a league-best 24-10 regular season record, earned the top seed in the Western Conference, and a first-round bye in the playoffs, which begin this week. Sioux Falls Skyforce are in action later this week at home for the NBA G League Western Conference semifinals. Other big news from the sport of basketball, men's or women's. South Carolina star Camila Cardoso is declaring for the WNBA draft. Potential lottery pick currently projected by ESPN's Michael Vopel to be selected 4th overall by the Los Angeles Sparks. And lastly, as far as Wooden finalists and All-Americans go, on the men's side, your Wooden Award finalists, R.J. Davis, Zach Edey, Dalton Connect, Tristan Newton of UConn, and Jamal Shed of Houston. And on the women's side, no surprise, Caitlin Clark is one of the finalists for the Wooden Award. And we'll read those off to you now. Group is rounded out by Stanford Cardinals' Cameron Brink, USC Trojans' Juju Watkins, and Notre Dame's Hannah Hidalgo. Of course, includes Paige Beckers of UConn and Caitlin Clark of Iowa. It's an exciting time of the year for women's basketball, men's basketball, and the NBA as we take shape for the NBA playoffs. Getting that final 10 set up for the play-in rounds, and then that final 8 on both sides of the league. A lot to look forward to for the Minnesota Timberwolves, still very much in play for that top overall seed. And I got to tell you, with Karl Anthony Towns going down, I thought for sure Minnesota would take a step back to 2 or to 3. And right now they're at the 2nd spot, but just a half game back of Denver with a handful of games to go. Got to be proud of the Minnesota Timberwolves and what they've done this season. We take the break. We come back with Arif Hasan of Wide Left Post to talk football, and more football. That's coming up next. It's an early Wednesday edition of Overtime. Thanks for tuning us in, as always, right here on ESPN 102.3 AM 1000 KSOO.
At ESPN, grab your phone or call us up on your smart device. Now let's get you back to Overtime with Bert Ramin on ESPN 102.3 and AM 1000 KSOO.
Right back with you on this early Wednesday edition of Overtime. A reminder, we're off the air early at 11:30, making way for the Minnesota Twins pregame coverage, 12:05, the start time from Milwaukee in Game 2 of a 3-game series against the Milwaukee Brewers. Minnesota Twins Baseball always lives right here on ESPN Sioux Falls. We're talking football right now, though, and we got our dose of breaking news to start out the day in the National Football League. Stefon Diggs heading down to the Houston Texans. We'll talk about that and much, much more as we're joined now by Arif Hasan of Wide Left Post, wideleft.football, the place to log in and check out great write-ups about the greater NFL. Arif, always a blast to have you. We've made it to April, full-on draft season. If it wasn't in March, it is now. Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Thanks for having me. I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's great to talk football with you as always. And let's talk about the success recently of your projects and publication, wideleft.football. Deep dives into Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, the Draft Network, everything like that. Let us in behind a little bit of all that work. How fun and satisfying is that work? I'm sure it's a grind also to invest a lot of time in those big pieces. But what is on the horizon for you, and how fun is it to put those together?
It was a ton of fun to put all of that stuff together, especially because all of those pieces required months of work, and they just happened to coincide in terms of best time to publish, all in the same month. So the Draft Network, for example, that took 3 months of reporting. I figured out, hey, this website's gone down. It used to be really popular. What's going on? I talked to over a dozen people, about this website. And for people who are unfamiliar, it pioneered a lot of the draft coverage that we have now, and it launched the careers of people that we see on ESPN, over at The Ringer, over at Pro Football Focus. What happened to this website? So I did a bunch of reporting. I found out that there was a gross level of mismanagement. Someone compared the CEO to Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos. It's a really salacious story. I highly recommend reading it.
Yeah.
But on top of that, the Aaron Rodgers conspiracy story, it was something that someone had asked me to look into for a podcast, the QAnon Anonymous podcast, way back when, just to see kind of how deep the rabbit hole goes. And then Awful Announcing reported that the rabbit hole goes even deeper than I thought by taking a look at one of his podcast appearances just this last month. And I figured, hey, he just got announced as somebody who could potentially be a VP candidate. We've seen some more about his, dallying with conspiracy, and I've done all this legwork on his history with conspiracy that I don't think a lot of people have dug into. And so I turned all of that into a piece to coincide with him being in the news cycle. And then, Cousins leaving, Minnesota for Atlanta. I had done a psychological profile of him way back, I think in 2021, following the 2021 season. And, I think a lot of people were misinterpreting the way that Cousins makes these decisions. So I wanted to give him kind of a send-off, characterize what, his legacy was in Minnesota, and kind of why he might make this kind of decision based off of his history. And so all of those were published in March. People really liked all of those pieces a lot. It's been big for me.
Absolutely true. And again, you can find more of Wide Left Post, wideleft.football. As easy as that in your web browser, wideleft.football. Talking with Arif Hasan, longtime guest on the show. Your immediate reaction to Stefon Diggs leaving Buffalo and joining Houston, which all of a sudden feels like we should start really paying attention to the Texans, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The Texans already had a pretty good receiving core with, Nico Collins and Tank Dell there. Robert Woods wasn't a bad third receiver to have, but now that you've got Stefon Diggs, one of the best route runners in the league, as well as a speed demon like Dell, a physical receiver like Collins, there's basically nothing that they can't do from like a route perspective or a stylistic perspective, given how good C.J. Stroud is, given how good D'Amico Ryans is. I think that there's a lot of upside with this Texans team that, frankly, is just in a division where it's kind of, maybe not wide open given how much potential all of these other quarterbacks have, but is theirs for the taking.
And obviously, it's a big get for Houston. We're waiting on the compensation update. I believe it's next year's second-round pick. I don't know for sure if that's been confirmed just yet on the receiving end for Stefon Diggs. New home there, Houston and Buffalo. Reeling at wide receiver, I'd be floored if they didn't go wide receiver early and often in the NFL draft. Speaking of the draft, Arif, let's talk about quarterbacks. How often have you changed your opinion on quarterbacks at this stage, year in and year out in drafts? And where do you stand right now in the QBs? How many do you think go in the top 10? How many do you think go in the top 15 this year?
Yeah, I think last year I was a little bit more volatile on these quarterbacks. I was more willing to change my mind on a player like Anthony Richardson, who, based off of conversations I've had with people who know a lot about quarterback play, assured me that this is a guy that could process really quickly, that he wasn't just as raw a quarterback as people might think. And so I was able to change my mind on him, on Will Levis a little bit, and it was something I was a little bit more open to. Now, I've seen a lot from all of these quarterbacks, Caleb Williams, Drake May, Jaden Daniels, and J.J. McCarthy, who now people expect to go in the top 10. And my ranking of these players hasn't changed too much. My opinion of McCarthy has improved a little bit just based off of, people kind of assuaging some of the concerns I had about his use in the offense and stuff like that. But for the most part, I have him ranked just like I did in January, which frankly is pretty unusual for me. I think that usually at some point I change my mind on these guys, but it is a fun quarterback class. And there's kind of a lot of upside and downside. I think that it's like a riskier high-end quarterback class than we've seen in a while.
Caleb Williams obviously is a plug-and-play kind of guy, and you'd say, oh, yeah, he's a fit for the Vikings too. But as far as realistic quarterbacks that could fall to Minnesota or Minnesota could trade up and get, let's call it pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, or maybe McCarthy falls to pick 11 for them to just organically pick him there. Who is the best fit for Minnesota in your eyes right now among the reasonable and rational guys that could land in Minnesota?
Yeah, I think Drake May is probably the best fit. I know a lot of people have made a lot of the connection between Josh McCown, who they just recently hired as the quarterbacks coach, and Drake May, who McCown coached in high school, and fair enough. I think that might play a role, but I think just generally speaking, May is this player who's got the ability to create big plays, sometimes out of nothing, and I think O'Connell has really appreciated that. One of his big coaching points with the Kirk Cousins over the past couple of years has been to kind of hold on in the pocket just a little bit longer than you normally would and keep your eye on the big play receiver for that particular play so that you can wait for them to open up. Well, May does like doing that. It's not as if he avoids timing. He's comfortable with timing-oriented offenses, but he does like to seek out that big play while still maintaining the structure of that offense. So if he can kind of speed up his eyes maybe a little bit, or if he can be a little bit more comfortable when he's scrambling, I think that he could be potentially the best quarterback in this class in the long run if the development goes the right way. So for me, he, I think, would be an excellent fit for Minnesota.
Talking with Arif Hasan of Wide Left Post, wideleft.football, the place to log on and see the great articles published all the time there, wideleft.football. Arif, when it comes to landing spots, everyone out there is talking about, man, Minnesota sure is a great landing spot for a young rookie quarterback, and I keep hammering the table and saying rookie quarterbacks are rarely really that good in year number 1, but let's just go ahead and stoke the flames here. What if it's an Andrew Luck or a Russell Wilson situation or an RG3 situation and the player hits the ground running for Minnesota? What's the ceiling this year if the rookie quarterback delivers a big season in Minnesota?
Yeah, if you've got a Russell Wilson rookie year or even a C.J. Stroud rookie year, I think that the possibility of Minnesota winning the division is on the table. Obviously, they have to do a lot to manage that defense, which did really well for a good chunk of last year, but I think a lot of people understand that the bones aren't really there for a sustainable defense, so that has to be resolved in some way. But given, the fact that there's a little bit of a ceiling on the Detroit Lions, given that they have Jared Goff, given that we don't know a ton about Jordan Love even after the year that he had, it is possible that Minnesota takes the division if they have that 5% outcome where their quarterback is already one of the best in the NFL. Like you said, the situation does give them a better opportunity for that to happen, given that they have the best receiver in the league. Their offensive line has improved by leaps and bounds over the past 2 years, and they're a little bit more aggressive about attacking the running game, adding somebody like Aaron Jones to that backfield.
A lot to look forward to for the Minnesota Vikings. It feels like the pieces are there, particularly on the offensive side. Good landing spot for a rookie quarterback. Let me ask you one more brain-busting question before we let you go, Arif. Always appreciate the time. Arif Hasan of Wide Left Post. If you play it out, a different scenario can unfold just every single minute with Minnesota in the first round. Let's say they don't get in on any of the top 4 quarterbacks and they end up staying pat. And the quarterbacks that are available at 11 and 23 are Bo Nix and Michael Penix. If you were running the Vikings, would you take one of those guys at 11, or would you roll with Darnold and punt till next year?
I don't think I'd draft either of those guys in the first round. In fact, if I were at 23 and both of those guys were available, I would trade down a little bit, see if I can get a second-round pick and then some. which seems like a waste after having traded up for Houston.
Yeah.
But I think that, you've lost your opportunity. Those things happen. It's time to kind of regroup. And I think I trade down a little bit, grab somebody, at the bottom of the first, grab somebody in the middle of the second, and hope that one of those guys available at the bottom of the first, the middle of the second, is one of those two quarterbacks. And of those two, I'd prefer Michael Penix. I just think that, his athleticism is all world. We just saw that at the pro day. He's got great arm strength. There's a lot that needs to be corrected just in terms of his mechanics, and you worry about his injury history and his age. But, there's a lot there to craft a big play offense like the one I just described that Drake May could potentially run. And then along the way, you can pick up a player like a Quinyon Mitchell at cornerback to shore up that defense, or Jerjon Newton to create some pass rush up the middle, while also maybe grabbing a potential quarterback of the future.
Great stuff as always. It can go so many different ways for the Minnesota Vikings as it can for each and every NFL team in the NFL draft. Arif Hasan of the Wide Left Post. Again, find him wideleft.football and on Twitter as well at Arif Hasan NFL. Arif, always a blast to follow along with all you're doing, and thanks so much for the time again today. We'll do it again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right. That's Arif Hasan of Wide Left Post. Again, wideleft.football. Great work there. Deep dives into Rodgers, Cousins, the Draft Network, and the future of that website, which once, as he said, was a pioneer. The mock draft machine, all sorts of deep dive coverage into the NFL draft and what went on at the Draft Network over the last couple of years. Great deep dive there. Again, wideleft.football. Arif Hasan, our guest here to round out hour number one. It's a super short hour number two coming up. We got headlines and highlights. We got the identity crisis brought to you by OPH and a pair of NFL draft previews for a pair of teams. The Carolina Panthers, the worst team in the NFL last year, and the Kansas City Chiefs, the best team in the NFL last season. It's all ahead. It's an early Wednesday edition of Overtime. Stay tuned. Back after this, top of the hour, hour number two here on Overtime.